there is a quiet humiliation that many people carry and never name. It happens in ordinary moments. You hesitate before speaking. You rewrite a message that was already clear. You walk into a room and suddenly become unnatural. You choose clothes, words, even ambitions through the imagined eyes of strangers. You are not living your life in those moments. You are managing an audience that does not truly exist. And the tragedy is not just that it makes you anxious. The tragedy is that it makes you false. Not false in some dramatic moral sense. False in the small daily betrayals that slowly teach you how to leave yourself. You begin to shape your life around reactions that may never come. You begin to obey opinions that were never clearly spoken. You begin to fear judgment so much that you forget to ask a harder question. What would remain of me if I stopped performing? Most people never answer that question. They spend years treating the symptom while feeding the wound. They call it being careful. They call it being socially aware. They call it humility. They call it maturity. But often it is none of those things. Often it is fear wearing good manners. I used to justify people-pleasing as respect, as consideration, as decency. And sometimes it was. But not always. A lot of the time it was fear. Fear of disapproval, fear of standing alone, fear of living in a way that might unsettle other people. So I told myself a flattering story while quietly surrendering my freedom. That is how self-betrayal survives. It does not enter your life wearing the face of weakness. It enters wearing the face of virtue. You say you are resting, but really you are avoiding. You say you are being patient, but really you are postponing. You say you are protecting your peace, but really you are hiding from exposure. You say you are being honest about your emotions, but really you are kneeling before every passing feeling as if it were law. And in this case, you say you care what people think because reputation matters. Yes, reputation matters, but most people are not suffering because they carefully guard a real reputation. They are suffering because they are addicted to imaginary evaluation. They live under invisible pressure. They overthink how they look, what they say, what they post, how they are perceived. They replay conversations like trial footage. They leave social interactions and begin conducting an internal autopsy. Why did I say that? Did I look stupid? Did I seem weak? Did they notice? Did they judge me? Meanwhile, the people they fear are usually lost in their own loops, their own insecurities, their own bills, their own disappointments, their own need to be seen. This is one of the strangest forms of vanity, to believe that other people are constantly occupied with you, when in truth most of them are struggling to survive themselves. I have felt that pressure too. Recently, I've caught myself overthinking small decisions, replaying conversations, and giving too much weight to opinions that were probably never that important to begin with. And every time I look closely, the same pattern reveals itself. The mind creates an audience, then the body obeys it, shoulders tighten, speech changes, desire becomes distorted. You stop asking what is right, what is true, what kind of person you want to be. You start asking, what will they think? That question has robbed more people of their lives than open failure ever did. Because failure hurts once. Performance as a way of life hurts every day. This is where Stoicism enters, not as comfort, but as judgment. Epictetus drew a brutal line between what is up to us and what is not, and other people's thoughts about us belong firmly on the wrong side of that line. Not partly, not occasionally, firmly. Marcus Aurelius went even further. He reminded himself again and again that the opinions of others are unstable, uninformed, and fleeting, not because people are evil, but because they are human, distracted, emotional, confused, preoccupied. Today they praise you, tomorrow they misunderstand you, the day after that they forget you. And yet people hand over their entire peace to this chaos. Seneca saw the absurdity clearly. We suffer more in imagination than in reality, and nowhere is that more visible than in social fear. You imagine ridicule before it arrives. You imagine rejection before it happens. You imagine disapproval and then begin serving it as if it were already fact. Stoicism does not tell you that social pain is unreal. It tells you not to make it sovereign. It does not deny embarrassment. It denies embarrassment the right to govern your character. That is the judgment. Your fear is not always proof of danger. Your shame is not always proof of guilt. Your self-consciousness is not always evidence that anyone is watching. Sometimes it is just undisciplined attention turned against itself, and if you do not correct that, your life begins to burn in slow, respectable ways. The first fire is the fire of approval. This fire rarely looks pathetic from the inside. It feels reasonable. You tell yourself you want to be liked because relationships matter. You tell yourself you want to make a good impression because standards matter. You tell yourself you want harmony because conflict is unnecessary. And again, sometimes that is true. But approval becomes corruption when you need it to remain internally stable. Then every room becomes a court. Every conversation becomes an audition. Every decision becomes a referendum on your worth. You do not say what you mean. You say what will land safely. You do not dress, create, speak, or move from conviction. You do it from calculation. You do it from calculation. You do not build a life. You manage reactions. Modern life feeds this constantly. You post and then monitor. You speak and then evaluate your own performance from the outside. You compare your real life to other people's curated certainty. You begin to crave not truth, but favorable interpretation. That hunger hollows a person out, because when approval becomes oxygen, honesty becomes expensive. You stop practicing courage in small moments. You laugh when you do not agree. You nod when you do not believe. You stay silent when you should speak. You dilute yourself so that others remain comfortable. And over time, you become difficult to trust, even to yourself. This is the hidden cost of approval seeking. It is not only that people can control you, it is that eventually you no longer know where they end and you begin. The Stoic answer is severe, but clean. If you must choose between being approved of and being rightly ordered within yourself, choose inner order. Not because public opinion is meaningless in every context, but because a life built on borrowed eyes will never become your own. If you do not extinguish this fire, you will spend your strongest years becoming acceptable to people who were never qualified to define you in the first place. The second fire is the fire of distraction. This one is more deceptive because it does not always feel social. Sometimes it feels private, even harmless. You feel exposed, uncertain, emotionally crowded, so you reach for noise. You scroll, you consume, you refresh, you jump between tabs, apps, voices, stimuli. You keep the mind occupied so it never has to stand still long enough to hear what it has become. Distraction is often mistaken for recovery. But a mind that cannot be alone with itself is not recovering. It is fleeing. And many people flee because when the noise stops, they meet an uncomfortable fact. They are living according to external pressure more than internal principle. They do not want silence because silence removes the costume. This is why overstimulation has become more than a bad habit. It has become a moral issue. A distracted person is easier to manipulate, easier to profligate, easier to provoke, easier to control. If your attention belongs to whatever is loudest, your life will belong to whatever is loudest too. Marcus Aurelius guarded his inner citadel because he understood that the first invasion is rarely physical. It is perceptual. The world enters through thought, through repeated impressions, through emotional contagion, through unexamined impulses. A distracted person does not choose, he reacts. And reaction, repeated long enough, becomes identity. This fire destroys depth. It destroys continuity. It destroys the ability to hold a thought long enough to test it. It destroys the discipline of asking, is this true? Is this necessary? Is this worthy of my attention? Without that discipline, you become vulnerable to every passing atmosphere. A trend can move you, a comment can wound you, a stranger's opinion can redirect your day. That is not freedom, that is mental servitude with modern branding. The person who cannot govern attention cannot govern life, and when distraction joins approval seeking, the damage compounds. Now you are not only asking what they think, you are refreshing constantly to find out. The third fire is the fire of self-pity disguised as sensitivity. This one is dangerous because it often speaks in the language of depth. It says, I am just being honest about how hard this is. It says, I am just honoring my emotions. It says, I have been misunderstood. It says, people do not realize what I carry. Again, there is truth here. Pain should be acknowledged. Emotions matter. Wounds are real, but Stoicism draws a line. Modern culture often refuses to draw. Pain is real. Indulgence is optional. There is a difference between feeling hurt and building a home inside hurt. There is a difference between naming a wound and turning it into identity. There is a difference between being sensitive and becoming self-absorbed. Self-pity feeds on imagined centrality. It whispers, your discomfort is proof that this moment is about you. Your awkwardness is proof that everyone noticed. Your fear is proof that retreat is wisdom. Your insecurity is proof that you should keep hiding until you feel ready. But readiness rarely arrives for people who worship comfort. Epictetus did not teach emotional numbness. He taught discipline of interpretation. He understood that events do not crush us by themselves. Our judgments about them do much of the crushing. A missed opportunity becomes a life sentence because of the meaning you attach to it. An embarrassing moment becomes a permanent identity because you rehearse it. A rejection becomes proof of inadequacy because you refuse to let it remain one event among many. Self-pity keeps reopening what life might have allowed to heal, and over time it does something worse than sadness. It makes responsibility feel cruel. You begin to resent anything that calls you upward. Structure feels oppressive. Correction feels insulting. Challenge feels unfair. That is how people remain weak while speaking the language of self-awareness. But truth is harder and kinder than that. No one is coming to organize your mind for you. No one is coming to remove every uncomfortable feeling before you begin living honestly. No one is required to understand you perfectly before you take responsibility for yourself. When this fire burns long enough, a person does not merely feel fragile. He becomes committed to fragility, and then, if he is fortunate, a moment arrives. Not a dramatic collapse, not necessarily some public disaster. Sometimes it is quieter than that. Sometimes it is the exhaustion of hearing yourself explain the same pattern one too many times. Sometimes it is the private disgust of realizing you have called fear by 10 different noble names. Sometimes it is the recognition that your life has become crowded with imagined witnesses and strangely empty of conviction. For me, the turning point was simple and ruthless. I realized how many decisions become distorted when you keep asking, what will they think? Instead of asking, what is right? What is true? What kind of person do I want to be? That question exposed more than anxiety. It exposed a trade. Freedom traded for approval. Clarity traded for safety. Self-respect traded for social smoothness. And once you see the trade clearly, the lie loses elegance. You can no longer say, this is just who I am. You can no longer say, I am waiting for confidence. You can no longer say, I am being careful. You know you are shrinking. You know it is costing you truth. You know that if you continue, your life will become more polished and less real. That is the moment you stop lying to yourself, not because you suddenly feel powerful, but because you become unwilling to remain divided. You finally see that weakness is not always loud. Sometimes weakness is the quiet habit of abandoning yourself before anyone else has the chance to reject you. That realization hurts, but it is clean pain. And clean pain is useful because it can forge something. The rebuilding begins in the first chamber. Temper the mind. Before you can live for yourself, you have to learn to observe yourself without immediately obeying yourself. This is where most people fail. They treat every thought like a report from reality, every emotion like a command, every fear like a prophecy. But the disciplined mind learns distance. A thought appears, they will think, I am ridiculous. You do not kneel, you examine. Is that true? Do I know that? And if they did think that, would it alter what is right? That pause is power. One practice that helped me was asking, if no one were watching, what would I choose? It is a simple question, but it cuts through noise with almost surgical force. If no one were watching, would you still say yes? Would you still stay silent? Would you still make that post? Would you still hide that ambition? Would you still apologize for taking up space? This is how you begin to separate your real values from social residue. Temper the mind by catching the first distortion. Notice when imagination starts staging a performance. Notice when you leave the present moment and climb into someone else's skull. Notice when you start narrating yourself instead of living. A strong mind is not empty of fear. It is no longer impressed by fear. The second chamber, order the day. Philosophy becomes pathetic when it never enters routine. A man can speak beautifully about self-respect and still wake late, drift through his hours, betray his priorities, and end the day wondering why he feels weak. Because disorder teaches dependence. If your sleep is erratic, your attention scattered, your body neglected, your work fragmented, your promises flexible, then your mind will remain vulnerable to public opinion. Why? Because inner disorder makes outer validation feel stabilizing. Structure is not punishment, it is self-trust made visible. Wake when you said you would wake, work when you said you would work, train the body, protect sleep, limit the noise that makes cowardice feel normal. Create blocks of time when no audience is present, no posting, no checking, no performing-only effort. Repetition matters because identity listens to evidence. Every kept promise sends a message. Every honest routine says, I can rely on myself. Every completed task without applause says, I do not need to be watched to be disciplined. This is where many lives quietly change, not in a dramatic declaration, in the boring nobility of consistency. The person who orders the day no longer needs motivation every morning. He needs memory. He remembers the kind of man he is trying to become, and then he acts accordingly. There is dignity in that. There is freedom in that. And there is a kind of peace that only enters a life once. Excuses start losing territory. The third chamber, hold the line under pressure. This is where Stoicism proves whether it is real or decorative. It is easy to admire principles in calm conditions. The test comes when life stops cooperating, when you are misunderstood, when your work is ignored, when you are misunderstood, when you are rejected, when the room goes cold, when boredom stretches, when loneliness sharpens, when uncertainty sits beside you and refuses to leave. Can you still remain ordered then? Can you absorb insult without instantly becoming smaller or louder? Can you face rejection without converting it into a verdict on your worth? Can you endure not being chosen, not being praised, not being immediately understood? This is where character becomes visible, not in the moments where life validates you, in the moments where it does not. The undisciplined person collapses into reaction. He defends too much, explains too much, retreats too quickly, or lashes out to restore a wounded image. The disciplined person returns to first principles. What is in my control? What is required of me now? What response leaves me intact? He does not confuse discomfort with disaster. He does not let temporary emotion write permanent behavior. He does not make a religion out of being seen correctly by everyone. This does not make him cold, it makes him stable, and stability is rare enough now that when people encounter it, they often mistake it for mystery. But it is not mystery, it is practice under pressure. So what begins to emerge from this forge? A stronger person is not someone who never feels self-conscious. It is someone no longer ruled by self-consciousness. It is someone who can enter a room without mentally splitting into two versions of himself, the one living and the one watching. Someone who can speak plainly, work quietly, dress simply or boldly without apology, disagree without trembling, be alone without feeling erased, be seen without becoming theatrical. He stops feeding habits that make him contemptible in his own eyes. Endless checking becomes unworthy of him. Performative modesty becomes unworthy of him. Asking invisible juries for permission becomes unworthy of him. Resentful passivity becomes unworthy of him. What changes first is not his image, it is his center. He becomes harder to bait, harder to flatter, harder to shame away from what matters. Calm authority begins to show up in ordinary life. In the pause before he responds, in the way he no longer rushes to explain himself, in the fact that he can make a choice without immediately imagining 1,000 reactions to it, in the way he keeps a promise privately, in the way he can endure being misread without abandoning what is true. This is the peace so many people say they want, but it is not the peace of comfort. It is the peace of congruence. The peace that comes when your outer life stops constantly negotiating against your inner knowledge. That peace is earned. It is earned each time you refuse to perform, each time you let silence remain silence, each time you stop polishing your image and return to your character, each time you choose truth over social camouflage. And slowly, almost invisibly, life becomes lighter. Not because nobody ever judges you. They will. Not because embarrassment disappears. It will not. Not because you become indifferent in some shallow sense. You do not. Life becomes lighter because other people's passing opinions stop feeling like instructions. That is the law to leave with. Most people are not thinking about you nearly as much as you fear. And the few who are do not deserve the authority you have given them unless they are wise enough to sharpen your character rather than shrink it. So stop building your days around imaginary witnesses. Stop protecting the habits that keep you weak. Stop calling fear by softer names. Ask the harder question. If no one were watching, what would I choose? What would I say? What would I build? What would I stop pretending to be? Then live from that answer. Not once. Daily. Because understanding this changes nothing by itself. Admiring Stoicism changes nothing by itself. Even agreeing with every word here changes nothing by itself. Even agreeing with every word here changes nothing by itself. The mind can recognize truth long before the life obeys it. So let this be more than recognition. Let it become conduct. Let it become structure. Let it become refusal. Let it become the quiet end of a life lived for spectators. If this resonated, like the video, comment with the line or insight that hit hardest, and subscribe for grounded Stoic philosophy and self-mastery content. But above all, remember this: a man becomes free the moment he stops asking the crowd for permission to be governed by what is true.